Mike Phelps here to tell you about changes we have made to improve the performance of the BDT code editor in recent months. BDT code editor performance has always suffered when editing large files or dealing with large projects. In part, this is caused by the large amount of background processing that takes place each time you make a change to the file that you have loaded in the editor. All this processing is something we call reconciliation, which includes the tasks that you can see listed here. Basically, the file that you're editing and other files that this file depends on have to be compiled. We have to create JSON information with the state of those files. We have to forward it back to BDT where it's deserialized, and then we construct something called an abstract syntax tree that the editor needs to synchronize the views and to tell what's going on. In order to get you a little bit of relief from this problem, we have implemented a couple of different approaches. We wanted first to get you a workaround solution as soon as possible, so we implemented a temporary fix, and then when that was in place, we embarked on a much longer and more complex multi-man-month effort to refactor some Eclipse libraries that were getting in the way of a better fix. You know about the quick fix that we put into BBJ 19 just before TechCon 2019. We implemented the maximum performance and maximum correctness editor modes that you could toggle back and forth between. Well, the reconciliation process was only done in max performance mode when you saved the file. So the editor was snappier, faster response, things like code completion worked a little better. But on the other hand, in max performance mode, as changes were made to the file, the abstract syntax tree information became more and more obsolete. And this would cause the editor window and the views to be out of sync, and code completion suggestions would get less and less accurate as time went on. You could save the file to do a reconcile and create new abstract syntax tree information. Or you could toggle to maximum correctness mode, which was essentially the editor's original behavior. Of course, then things would be slow again. When that was implemented, we went to work on the longer, much more complex and difficult, but better solution to replace the Eclipse DLTK, or Dynamic Languages Toolkit, with something we now call BLTK. DLTK is a set of open source libraries that the BDT plugins were originally based on. DLTK made it possible to bring BBJ into the Eclipse environment, but it wasn't a perfect solution. And it has blocked us in many ways and prevented us from doing things that we need to do to meet BBJ's specific requirements. In order to gain more control over the editor reconciliation process and be able to do a variety of other things, we copied the DLTK plugins and created the Basis Language Toolkit, BLTK. This is a more BBJ-centric version of these plugins. You can think of BLTK plugins as an interface between the business basic language and Eclipse. You can kind of think of BBJ as a square peg type of computer language, and Eclipse, on the other hand, offers only round holes, better suited for languages like Java or C. BLTK lets us remodel those round holes into square ones that are more suited for BBJ. And now, what's available in BBJ 2110? Forget all about the maximum performance and maximum correctness editor modes. They've been removed. Now we have, once again, a single editor mode that combines the best parts of max performance and max correctness modes with none of the drawbacks. There's no more toggling between two different editing modes, trying to remember which one is currently active. The toggle setting has been removed from the BBJ menu and the preferences. Now you just type and things happen in the background. When a change is made to a BBJ program loaded in the code editor, a document change event is fired, And BLTK allows us to grab each one of those individual events and evaluate it to see exactly what was changed. And we can decide, is this change important enough to do a complete background reconciliation, or is this something that's not important? We don't have to reconcile, and we can just use the previously cached abstract syntax tree information and press on. What this means is whenever you request a code completion or enter anything that would cause a new item to appear in the outline or BDT Explorer views, like a new class or a new method or field in that class, or any time that you delete anything with a backspace or by selecting and cutting it, or any time that you add a new line, as you might do when you paste something into your file, a full reconcile will be performed. However, anything else that you enter in is not critical. Therefore, there's not going to be a reconcile. 99% of the code that you type in, or the things that you might enter, there's no need to recompile, reconcile everything again. Also, when you save a file in this new situation with BLTK, saving is back to its original speed. That doesn't any longer trigger a reconcile as we made it do in the old max performance mode. BLTK has kind of opened the floodgates to all kinds of additional improvements that we'll be telling you about in days to come. And we'll be extremely excited to tell you about some of these things as we get them ready to go. So stay tuned.
There are a number of plugins to the Eclipse IDE that can help you be more productive in how you develop your BBJ programs. One of those plugins we want to look at next is called the BBJ Keyword Help plugin. And what it does is it gives you access to keyword help. The BBJ Keyword Help plugin enhances your ability because it saves you time jumping from your code to keyword help and back and forth. What exactly does it do for you, though? It's a plugin for the Eclipse IDE. It provides access to Basis Online help on BBJ keywords. So basically the same help pages you would be able to access directly from our help search page. It displays a list of available help topics that can open in a browser and lets you choose which, if any of those, are the ones you actually intended to find out about. So what exactly does the plugin do for you? Well, it basically enables you to do the following things: to go directly from your code or from entering text as you type to the help page for BBJ keyword. Search for and access BBJ help directly from inside of Eclipse. So you don't have to switch back and forth. You can work completely from inside of the Eclipse IDE if you wish. It allows you to view help in an Eclipse tab or in an external web browser, whichever you prefer. So let's look at the 3 ways that you can access BBJ keyword help from inside of Eclipse. To get help on keywords in an editor, and by that we mean a BBJ code editor that is open on a BBJ source file in BDT. The way you do that is each time the input cursor, meaning the mouse cursor that click the input cursor from the text, is in the active BBJ editor and it moves, the BBJ keyword help plugin has a view that it displays to you called the BBJ keyword help view. And that view updates the list of topics that it thinks relate to where you put the cursor. We'll see what that means more precisely in just a moment. For example, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll notice that there's a capture from a BBJ code editor on the far right. You'll notice that the input cursor is that little vertical grayish-black bar is on the word BBJ API in the editor. And below that, you'll see we have the BBJ keyword help view being displayed. And in the BBJ keyword help view, it shows a list of entries on the bottom that start with BBJ API. The first one is the BBJ API class itself, and then below that you see the classes with various methods in case you wanted to jump to some more specific information. So all you have to do in the BBJ keyword help view is click on say, the first entry in that list, BBJ API, and that will cause an action. And let's look at what actually happens. Let's look at how to use the BBJ Keyword Help plugin from inside of a BBJ code editor. In order to use the BBJ Keyword Help at all, the first thing we have to do is open the BBJ Keyword Help view. To do that in Eclipse, there's a standard model under the Window menu item. There is an option called Show View. Select Show View and then mouse down to Other. This is where you'll find all of the less commonly used views, including the BBJ Utilities ones. And click on Other. Look under BBJ Utilities, which happens to already be expanded here. Select the BBJ Keyword Help plugin view, and then click the Open button. Notice that it opens a new view here in the bottom called BBJ Keyword Help with a little light bulb next to it. And so far, it's pretty much empty. There's really not much going on there, but it's up where we can see it now, and that's the important thing. In order to look at how we're going to use that from inside of a BBJ code editor, we'll need to open a BBJ code editor on some file. And for our purposes, we're going to use this test file I have here, test-GUI-grid-style.bbj. When you click in a BBJ code editor, the act of clicking will trigger the BBJ Keyword Help view to update its displayed list of available help entries. So if you click on, for example, a keyword such as the word declare, we'll notice that down here now there is one entry called the declare verb, and that means that there's a help page available online for the declare verb. If I were to click on something completely different, such as a method called set callback, notice now I see a list of all of the set callback method names, as well as if there happened to be a class name set callback, which there is not, and it lists those here in the window. In this case, let's look for, from our example before, the word BBJ API. So if I click on the word BBJ API, you'll notice that there is now a list of items down here that's fairly long, and all of them have BBJ API in them somewhere. So if I scroll, as I'm doing now, you'll see this goes on quite a ways. There are a lot of entries relative to the BBJ API class. Most of these are specific methods that are available on that class. Let's go back to the top now. And if I double click this entry, what happens? Well, Eclipse brings up an external browser, which happens to be a Chrome browser. And there is the help on the BBJ API class. And it's as simple as that. From here, notice I'm at the standard search page from Basis, so I'm also able to then go on and search for other things if I wish. But that's how easy it is. Let's go back to our Eclipse for the moment, and let's notice one other thing. You can think, well, what if I click on a word? How about if instead I begin to type something? What will happen as I'm typing? So what I'm going to do now is type part of a keyword. Notice as I typed, the entry showed up. Backspacing, and let's try something more interesting like BBJ sysGUI. I start to type BBJ sysGUI, and every time I add another character, it refines the search. Notice one interesting thing about the entries in the bottom list down here. This is not a starts with match. In other words, typing BBJS does not find only the entries that start with BBJS. It finds every entry that actually has a BBJ-esque set of characters in it. So in some respects, that may surprise you because you prefer a prefix type match. But in this case, you get all matches that contain the text that you are typing. So I can type, look until I found it. Let's say I'm looking for a BBJ sysGUI method. I don't have to even type the whole BBJ sysGUI, and I can scroll down and get help on the getLastEventString method, and voila, up comes the getLastEventString method on the BBJ sysGUI class. So you're able to use the code editor as a collection of text entries that you can click on, and or you may type in it as you go, and the keyword help will update its list of matches as you type. Alternatively, you can get help on keywords using the view directly. You don't have to work from a code editor. How might that work? Let's see. Type a keyword in the BBJ Keyword Help View's text edit field to access the same help, but without having to either have any BBJ program file open in an editor or have the keyword visible so that you can click on it. So you can use it basically just like an independent search engine to search our help for topics that relate to a particular thing you want to type. This is more useful in some cases. For example, if you type BBJ API directly into the text field at the top of the BBJ Keyword Help view, you'll notice that you get the same list of available help topics below it that we saw a minute ago when you clicked on the word BBJ API in the editor. In this case, though, I don't have an editor open necessarily. I just typed something in to see what I could do. It's a search engine, and there we are. There is one extra that you get when working from the BBJ Keyword Help view, and that is at any time that you have a list of entries being shown in the BBJ Keyword Help view, no matter where that list came from, if you right-click one of the entries in that list, it will insert the text for that entry into the active editor. So if there is an active BBJ code editor, then this works, and it will let you do it whether you type directly in a BBJ editor and highlighted something, or whether you're typing in the view's text field that we showed you just a moment ago. Sort of think of it as another type of code completion. To see how this works, we need to run the BBJ Keyword Help plugin, so let's do it. Let's look now at how you can get BBJ Keyword Help by working through the view instead of working through the editor. As you remember, if I click in the editor at the word BBJ API, we get the list of matches down here, and I can access help from them. Let's say instead I don't have it in the editor already, but I want to go search for something and treat this like a search window. I will be able to type in this text entry field in the BBJ Keyword Help and do a search that way. So let's say I wish to search for BBJ sysgui entries. There we have the BBJ sysgui entries, and if I go down to the very bottom, I have one on BBJ sysgui methods. And similar to when working from the editor, if I double click this, up comes the help page on the BBJ sysgui methods. That's exactly as it worked before, except I got there relatively dynamically. Now, one of the things that is also available when you work in the view is there's a special capability that isn't advertised very much, but if I select, say, the BBJ sysgui event entry, and I right-click it, not double-click with the left mouse, but I right-click that entry in the view, which I'm about to do, watch what happens in the editor. Notice that it replaced the word that led up to the cursor with the BBJ sysgui event word that I right-clicked. Think of it as sort of a shortcut to a code completion that is only available based on BBJ keyword themselves. This only works in a couple cases, in a couple conditions. You have to have the cursor in the active editor, and you have to have it at the end of a word, because the model that it's based upon is that you were typing in the editor, say, and you went down to the list and used that searching through the list to complete whatever you wanted to type. Thus, it replaces whatever you had typed with whatever you selected. So remember, it's a right click, it's a shortcut for code completion, and it's just another ability that you get from the BBJ Keyword Help view. Finally, let's look at getting help from the toolbar. Eclipse comes with a toolbar across the top that has a number of toolbar buttons that allow you to have shortcuts to particular functions and features, and the BBJ Keyword Help plugin is no exception. It has a button. There is a button called the Open the Basis Documentation toolbar button, and you see it on the screen there. Looks like a small planet. And if you click that button, it can open a browser on Basis's help search page. This may help you if all you really want to do is get directly to the larger full function search engine and do your work directly still inside the IDE or outside of it. But if you're just more comfortable searching from our Basis home help search page, then this is a quick way to get there. Click the toolbar button and it will open that in a browser window. Now, you may have noticed in our demos that in our first example, Eclipse opened the help pages in an external browser. But in that last screenshot, Eclipse opened the basis search page in a browser tab that was actually inside of Eclipse. You'll notice it showed up as just another tab in the editor area of the Eclipse IDE. So what was the difference? Well, it was an artificial difference, but let's look at it in detail. Eclipse lets you configure how it opens the browser windows and what browser it should use. So on the right now you see a view of Eclipse's preferences page where we've selected the general web browser display. And notice that in that display, you have the choice of telling Eclipse to use either an internal web browser, and that means a web browser that is hosted as a tab inside of Eclipse itself, or to use an external web browser. And that means to pop up a new tab or open a new web browser as an external application, depending upon how you've configured your browser. You also get to choose for the external web browsers which browser that's available you would like it to use. You can always just say use the default system web browser and it will use whatever you have configured at the OS level. But also if you have some installed, which I do in this case, Microsoft Edge and Chrome, then it should list those and allow me to choose one or the other of those specifically if I wish. And then I click apply or apply and close. And in the future, they'll open externally instead of internally. So you have that option and you are in control. There's another Eclipse plugin that we want to look at today that can be really helpful for you, and it's also part of the BBJ Utilities collection of plugins. It's called the BBJ Code Formatter, and it lets you clean up your code to some arbitrary set of guidelines that you wish to specify. Let's see how this can make your code more readable and more maintainable. What it actually does is give you a one-button click way to reformat code that you have open in an editor. The BBJ Code Formatter, it is, again, a plugin for the Eclipse IDE. It does allow you to select BBJ source code file and quickly format it. The output format is customizable through user preferences, and by that we mean you get to choose a set of rules or options that the code formatter should apply to your code or not apply as you choose. What type of formatting can it do? Well, this is where we get down to the important part. BBJ Code Formatter lets you remove line numbers. For those of you who have been with BBJ for quite a while, you know that it's always come with a denum option to remove numbers from your code. And by that we refer to the BBJ line numbers. And you are able to do that from the BBJ Code Formatter plugin just as well. It also will remove line continuations. So that means if you have a line of code that was really long that extended across 3, 4, 5 lines in your file, it will remove the line continuations and return those to a single line of code. It will apply standardized indentation for readability, meaning you can set the size and content type, the character used for your indentations on the leading entries of your lines. It will convert single-line if statements to multi-line if statements in order to make them indentable and readable. It will split multiple statements that are separated by a semicolon into multiple lines. And it can convert all business basic keywords to uppercase. Let's look at the BBJ Code Formatter plugin in Eclipse and see how that actually works. The first one of those options we want to look at in more detail is the one called denum. And in order to denumber a program in the Eclipse IDE and in the BBJ Code Formatter plugin, it needs to know where to find two of the utilities that are installed with BBJ. And those are BBJ CPL and BBJ LST. Those programs are necessary, and you'll notice in that red box on the right, you see that in order for the denum to be fully configured, you're going to have to tell us where to find them. You do that by using the browse buttons for each, and then navigate and select each program as identified there by the prompt. So you have to go and navigate to BBJ CPL and the path to the BBJ list. Those programs, of course, are usually installed in the BBJ home/bin folder. You may have them somewhere else, but that would be the normal place you would look for them. The next set of configurable options we're going to look at is the code indentation group box that you see again with that red box around it on the right. And that sets values that the plugin should use when it goes to indent your BBJ code. The first thing you can set is the indentation character to use, and your choices are to either use a tab or space character when indenting. Right below that is the indentation width, which says how many of those indentation characters you want to insert per indentation level. A standard value is 4 spaces. Be aware that 4 spaces is not the same as 4 tabs. You want to specify each as characters to be inserted. As you can see, mine is configured for 4 spaces. The last group box is the largest one here, and we're going to look at the options for code formatting, the actual layout and organization of some of those BBJ constructs. And this is where we'll discuss each one of them. One of the things that we'll do is split single line if statements, and you can tell it, yes, I want to split them into multiple lines, and it will do that for you. We'll look at a moment or two at an example of that. It also will remove line continuations. We spoke about that before, and that is that it'll string your line continuation segments back into a single line, one single line of code. One example of splitting a single line if statements is the one on the screen there for you, which says if we had the from line, then once we have formatted it with the option turned on, you get the to box, the lower part there, which shows how indentation and line breaks can make your code more readable and maintainable. Here's an example of what happens when you remove line continuations. If, for example, you had the from code in your BBJ code editor that had 5 lines that were actually 4 continuations of the first line, once you have invoked the BBJ code formatter plugin, you would end up with a single line as specified in the to box at the bottom. To continue in the code formatting section, let's look at the rest of those options there. It does convert keywords to uppercase if you like. You can specify that you want all of them to uppercase. It will also split inline comments, which means if you have a rem comment that is on a line at the end of the line after some code, it will split those out to their own line of code. And lastly, the option to split inline label comments is different because it specifies to remove all the inline rem comments that are on a label line to be on their own line, and some people prefer to treat that separately. So once again, let's look at what some of those examples might look like. We have the from for an example of a piece of code that was not using uppercase keywords, and then once formatted, the to box shows us how it would look if all those keywords were uppercase, such as the if and the phi and the next and the then. And you can see for yourself that in some cases that makes your code more readable, and that's available for you to use. Here's an example of separating compound statements, where you have 2 statements on one line separated by a semicolon. The from shows that in a BBJ code editor, and then once you've formatted, the to shows what it would look like as 2 separate lines of code. So how would you actually denum a BBJ program, and what would it look like if you used the BBJ code formatter plugin? Let's look at it. First, you open a BBJ program with line numbers in a BBJ code editor, and then you click the denum toolbar button, which is the one with the red box around it there on the Eclipse toolbar, and the denumbered program will now appear in the editor. You can save or abandon those changes. If you look on the right, we have the before and after. So the before box at the top clearly has BBJ line numbers in the code, and the after box below that clearly no longer has BBJ line numbers. To generate a formatted output, you do that also from the toolbar, and you use the BBJ toolbar button. You open a BBJ program with line numbers in a BBJ editor, and you click the Format toolbar button, which is the button highlighted in the red square there. And again, the formatted program appears in the editor. Again, you can save or abandon those changes in that editor. And if you look on the right-hand side there, we see that we have the before and the after. And the before shows an arbitrary BBJ source code file, and the after shows the full result of having invoked it with a series of configurable options, including capitalizing keywords, uppercasing them, and so on. And to give you a feel for the changes, remember, if you don't like what you see, you can click the undo button or just close the editor without saving, and you will abandon those changes. We are constantly trying to add new formatting options to the BBJ Code Formatter plugin, because the more rules you have and the more control, the more useful the code formatter will be to you. So what will you be able to configure soon? What kinds of things do we have on the drawing board coming ahead? Let's look at some of them and see what you think of those. One of the things that we've had a request for is to be able to collapse blank lines. So then if you have 5 or 10 blank lines, it'll collapse them down into a single blank line. Removing trailing white space from your lines of BBJ code. Specifying the end of line characters so that you can move, for example, between Unix end of line characters and Windows end of line characters, and using a specified format once you've reformatted the file. These are coming. Keep looking for them in the not too distant future.